For more on this July retail report, we're joined by Sucharita Kodali. She's the retail analyst at Forrester, focusing on digital business strategy. Good to see you and welcome to the show. I think some people were surprised that retail sales, while they stagnated, did not drop despite sort of all the pricing pressures we now see in the economy. Were you surprised?
I was not surprised. The truth is that the economy has actually a lot of signals that suggest it's much stronger than what the media seemingly is portraying, what a lot of politicians have portrayed. We have seen retail sales grow and be at their strongest levels, exceeding 2019 through much of 2022. So that, I think, is really the truth. Even when you take out inflation, the numbers are still strong relative to 2021 and much, much higher, up in double digits over 2019. And that, I think, really points to the fact that consumers are spending. Consumers have income to spend, and they haven't cut back yet. I mean, normally what you would expect in an inflationary environment is that people would cut back if they are struggling. But we haven't seen cutting back.
Right. And I think a large part of that is the fact that in the last report that we saw from the Labor Department, that jobs were plentiful. Yes, there are some Americans who aren't working or don't want to work, but there are plenty of jobs available, and those who do want to work, they can work. And obviously, if you're working, you can spend money. I mean, is that where the core of the strength is coming from?
Yeah, unemployment is at record lows. It continues to be at record lows there. The job market is still very, very tight. Even when you talk about debt, the biggest consumers who are taking on debt are the most affluent consumers, those with credit scores of over 760. So the economy in many other metrics is quite strong. Even GDP, when the BEA released the numbers, it's a quarter-over-quarter number when there are declines. Year-over-year is still actually quite strong.
Right. Now, some might argue that we are still seeing the big bump and hangover, if you will, from revenge spending that we saw following the decline of Omicron. I guess is maybe not the right word, but people came out of their houses and they all went crazy. They went to travel, they went to vacation, the kids are out of school. Are we still seeing some of that? And more importantly, what's going to happen come September, October, and November? Because we're already seeing airplane ticket prices come down.
Well, what's amazing about travel is that even in spite of the high prices, consumers are still consuming. So when prices go down, perhaps people who hadn't planned on traveling may actually go travel. And hopefully some of those delays in the European airports will be reduced, kind of as some of the travel subsides. As far as how much is this still the impact of people coming out of their homes, I think that this is a permanent reset in the U.S. economy, because what we saw through the pandemic was more people saving more money than they had before, a lot of people getting upskilled, they had paid down debt, they got out of some of the worst debt that they were in. This fundamentally, I think, is a reset of essentially higher net worth for a lot of consumers, and I expect that we will not see any decline, but even if we maintain this level of spend, that would be a good thing.
During the pandemic, you and I know plenty of people who were working from home, and I think a number of them weren't really working from home. I think it's called shopping from home, and they were buying things online throughout the day. As they've come back, as you say, normalized, is there a different trend that's happening now with the digital sales versus sort of the normal in-house retail that we used to be accustomed to?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and what I will say is that e-commerce had a few really, really good months in 2020, and there was a perception that that level of growth would go on forever. That didn't happen. But what we essentially see in e-commerce is a penetration in the low 20% of all of retail sales now happen online. We expect that number to go up to 28% by 2026. So it's not a trivial amount that's being spent online, but the behaviors, what we saw is more people doing things like buying groceries for the first time. But just because they purchased groceries online for the first time doesn't mean that every grocery transaction subsequent to that is now going to be online. Most people choose to purchase their groceries in physical stores, and then when it's convenient or when they need the groceries delivered to them, like say they're sick or they kind of for whatever reason can't make it to the store, then they will choose that particular transaction online. But it's not a permanent shift to like 50% of transactions are ever going to happen online. I think that, yeah.
We talked to a lot of traders and just regular folks, and I am surprised that there was talk of cutting back on spending, but really we haven't seen the data to prove that. So apparently they are spending, as you say. Our good reporter on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, we were talking about Target today, and they posted another sort of mediocre report on their retail sales, but they said that things are expected to get better. So my question to you is, going into the next couple of quarters, who do you think the winners and losers might be in the retail space?
Yeah, I would actually argue that Target only had a mediocre quarter because the last several quarters, especially those through the pandemic, were outstanding. You have to remember that in 2021, it was the first time that Target ever made $100 billion in revenue. They were kind of hovering in the 60s and $70 billion in annual sales prior to that. So it was a big deal, and they still posted positive comps from a top-line revenue standpoint now. So on top of all of the gains from the pandemic, they're still gaining. And the bad number was the earnings number, which was because it sounds like they're writing down a bunch of inventory, they're delaying a lot of orders, they're cutting a lot of that, or they're trying to work through a lot of that merchandise, and that will happen. That'll probably happen over the next few months. They're doing a better job than a lot of merchants that I've seen that sometimes will hold on to inventory that is bad inventory for years.
Sucharita, excellent to have you for the analysis on this. I look forward to having you back, hopefully in a couple of weeks, post back to school retail report. Thank you.
Thank you.